Welcome to RealAg Live, everybody. I'm your host, Shaun Haney. Thanks a lot for tuning in today. Really do appreciate it. Hoping everybody's having a great day out there, no matter where you are farming in North America or the world, for that matter. We are live today on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We got a great guest. If you have any questions at all, make sure you ask them in the comment box, no matter which social media application you are watching on. Okay, so a lot of times in agriculture, we talk about, you need to do things differently. You need to be innovative. You need to be entrepreneurial. And then when somebody does it, we sort of like, I don't know, this is kind of different. I'm not too sure about it. Well, today we're going to talk to a farmer that is doing some really, really cool stuff and really pushing the limits on what crop production looks like here in North America. We're talking to Jason Mauck of Gaston, Indiana. His Twitter handle is @JasonMauck1. Jason, how are you doing today?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. Hey, it's great to have you here. Really looking forward to the discussion. So, hey, Jason, tell me a little bit about your farm before we get started.
So my farm is a little different. Constant Canopy Farms is about 400 acres of chaos or funny farming. We've got animals in woods and intercropping and intergrazing and relay cropping and all this stuff. And thankfully, sharing things on social media has allowed us to grow, and I get to talk about it, and that really supports what we're doing there. And then we have Mauck Farms, which is just the old school conventional farming. I sell some seed, and we've got a lot of pigs. We've got 12,000 pigs, and my uncles have cattle, and just mostly, Pleasantville, if you will.
Nice. Okay, so let's talk a little bit here about Constant Canopy. You're really doing a lot of really cool stuff in the area of relay cropping. Where'd you get the idea? Like, what sparked this?
Well, I was a landscaper, so when I got done here with Ball State University, I was in sales for a little bit. I just wanted to get my hands dirty, so I started a landscape contracting business. And I am comfortable with plants and canopy, and that's how I thought I could manage weeds. We had several hundred acres of turf and landscape beds, and all the employees and everything, and we mowed our grass really tall. And I could control things and control our costs. So when I came to the farm and we had this kill everything, clean slate, one thing, it really did not make any sense to me. So I was always interested in this as soon as I started farming. And then I saw a couple other farmers. If you're on, you see John Cutts harvesting wheat today. I saw a video of him in 2014, and I just got like tingles. I loved it so much. And so I started to put my own spin on it. And the other big thing is we have tons of fertility. We have tons of this manure. And I've been trying to tackle that problem with distribution, and the two kind of intersect.
So let's, for the audience that's not familiar with relay cropping, what is relay cropping?
So by definition, relay cropping is two crops that come off at two different time periods. And, polycropping or intercropping would be too similar. So relay would be like wheat and soybeans. Poly would be like corn and soybeans or something else.
Yeah. Okay. And so what is a combination that I've seen a lot of your videos where you're using corn soybeans and wheat, but you're not limited to that.
Right. And I did not bring a visual thing, but this is my graph. This is what intercropping is all about, is milking the curve. And as we decrease our amount of plants, we get more plant yield. So when we look at relay cropping, there's a huge opportunity there because the wheat is way ahead of the soybeans. So all those little tiny leaves on the side of the wheat can be empowered. And what we can do is we can get 2 or 3 or 4 heads per wheat seed, and we can ban nutrients. So that lowers our variable costs. And then we can set up the next crop and create this venue of awesomeness or awesome sauce. So we can get solar intrusion when the beans are making pods. We can use the corpse of the wheat to keep the ground cool and preserve moisture. And we can extract moisture when there's too much of it. So I look at these relay crops not as, hey, we're going to just feed the world and produce more crops. It's more of how can we utilize different variables to aggregately make more profitability and replace costs.
Okay, so if you're going, let's say wheat and beans is the example, how much are you cutting the rates? If you were to monocrop, what would your plant population be versus what you're doing inside of the relay cropping system?
So let's go like perfect wheat crop would be, early soybeans. So we'll cut them in late September. We come in there and we plant 2 million wheat seeds, maybe 1.6 million. We lay down P and K. We probably shoot it with 2 shots of nitrogen, and we're shooting for 100 bushel wheat. We might get 110, but really the people up north do a little bit better on wheat because they don't get as hot. We kind of speed up grain fill a little bit too much, and then we try to get our double crop beans in. And then we're in the position right where our latitude is, where if we go for a fuller season of wheat, then it hurts our beans because we can't plant them. So you're just constantly like, I don't want fungicide because it'll preserve maturity or whatever. So with relay cropping, instead of soybeans following, we're going into trashy cornfields. So instead of the rotation being beans and you kind of double up the beans, we go in after trashy corn, and we can move that residue out of the way and just band wheat strips in 60-inch rows.
Okay.
And then that later sets up easier logistics to get our combines in there, and it just lowers the amount of units that you have to invest. So you can invest in more technology, and I think this will be a big thing, whether we get into corn and beans or whatever. You can get into better technology and just have less row units.
And so when you are, say, going to plant that wheat for the relay crop, instead of being at 1.6 to 2 million seeds per acre, what are you at?
I've been anywhere from 250,000 up to close to 1 million.
Wow.
Depending on the soil type. So we're either keeping basically the same row population, or the 250 was we actually plant wheat above our manure injection. So I'm planting wheat with our manure tanker. And what happens is the wheat roots hit that Colombian Bam Bam organic and just go crazy and create this bush wheat. And then if you plant it too thick, then it just falls down. So we throttle that way back, and we create this cash crop with hardly any cost at all.
And so you're seeding that wheat quite late then, if you're going after the corn.
Yes, yep. It's a little bit later, but we really don't want to get it too big. It's easier on the management side in the spring if we use an earlier wheat and plant it a little bit later.
Okay.
It's not as big, so we don't damage as much with everything, and we just have to follow corn. So
okay, and what wheat yield are you shooting for? Like I've seen some of the videos right now where you're basically just clipping the top of the wheat, harvesting it, maybe touching those soybeans a little bit. What kind of wheat yield are you shooting for in that regard?
So we shoot for 50.
Yeah.
The math is we average about 37 inches of rainfall here. I don't know what the millimeters are.
It doesn't matter. We talk inches too. Don't worry about it, dude.
Okay. So every 3 bushels of wheat extracts 1 inch of rain out of the soil profile. So if I would get 110 bushel wheat, I pretty much sucked all the moisture out. Now I could get lucky and get heavy summer rains and provide for a double crop, but most years out of 10, that's not going to really happen. So we're trying to extract, 12, 15 inches of rain. That's usually too wet for soybeans to grow well in April, May, and June. And then that allows us to go back to this curve mentality where we're back here getting, 50% of the production on 25% of the inputs.
Absolutely.
So if you think, okay, I've got 2 or 3 entities that are going to contribute to my bottom line, I don't have to pay for my wife's couch that she wants with this crop. I can think contribution margin. So I look at my variable costs and say, hey, I've got $100 in variable costs between, my seed, fertilizer, harvesting, and everything. I want to produce $250 worth of revenue. That's $150 contribution margin. Now, if I tax the soybeans to where they yield less and yield, beans are $8 or $9, once I tax them more than 15 or 20, I should have just went fishing. I didn't gain anything. So the value is, where is this relationship curve to where we can get enough out of the wheat to get contribution margin and actually enhance the soybean yields or keep them steady and lower our cost of goods sold. So if we keep the same row population on our soybeans and omit a row, immediately right out of the gate, we're at $25, cost of good production. Now can we start banding our herbicide and actually using the wheat thatch as weed control in that time and space? And that's basically the last 5 years of my Asanisol, or whatever the word is, crazy tank, is like, okay, we're too aggressive here. This is kind of happy medium. Okay, we're going to have fluctuations in weather where it's either dry or too wet. And I'll ramble on a little bit here.
Yeah,
but
go ahead.
You get into lighter soils and we get a little undulation. Sometimes, even though that wheat is consuming water, we can physically stop the rainfall on the side of the hill, or that really light sandy soil. We can use the thatch to preserve rain. We can have a healthier plant that'll root down deeper, so we can gain resiliency and actually be more thrifty on our rainfall by consuming some and just managing our infiltration. And at the same time, in the black ground, if we get that big ass 3-inch rain and it all wants to run off after a ½ inch to the bottom and drown it out, we're going to stop it physically in its place so it'll infiltrate in place. And then 2, it's like if I had a barrel of beer and a bunch of drunk Canadians, they're going to drink that excess water. So we can create and get rid of. I'll make another little thing here.
You know your Canada well. I'm impressed.
I spoke there and I can't hang, okay? So this is your water, right? It's crazy. If we can think about, making our crops, then we make it more like an equilibrium. And I know it's really simple, and you sell a lot of ads to a bunch of all these foo-foo juices and all this crap we need, but if we can keep our water in a more equilibrium where there's either enough or it's not too wet, plants just grow better. They get oxygen to the roots. We keep all the root hairs, and we manage root depth and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so if you're getting a 40 to 50 bushel wheat crop, the beans are kind of the gold then.
Yes.
What kind of yield are you chasing on the beans relative to what you would get in a more typical monocrop situation?
So our APH, or average yield, is somewhere around 60 bushel beans. In our high fertile ground, we can get 75 or 80 bushels if we get a decent amount of rainfall. So last year we had 88 bushel relay beans. The previous year we were 108, was the plot winner. We had several beans go over 100 bushels. And in our better ground, I prefer to have relay soybeans. Not only are they a bigger, healthier root mass, but I do this really trick play. We'll get this out again. Is a prune job. So you've got your wheat right here and your soybeans, like so. So you got your wheat in the middle and your soybeans. When I remove this wheat, the beans are pushing up against that biomass.
Right. So
Shaun, let's imagine you're at Thanksgiving, right? And you ate way too much. And you wore skinny jeans for some dumb reason.
Why would I do that? That is so stupid.
So when you go to the couch, you unbutton your pants and you watch football.
Oh, absolutely.
That's this little venue that we create for the soybeans. So first off, I don't have to clip the soybeans. I have this piece of equipment from Flexi Select, that make the soybeans do the limbo. So they can be 2 foot tall with pods on them, and we can compress them down to 5 inches, and they'll just pop back up. And then we remove that biomass, and now all these leaves that were, a mushroom that's just in the dark, now get light. And now we create this venue where the soybeans, their new light is now all around them. So in monocrops, what happens is that we race to canopy because there is value in early sun, but you can get that in another entity. But once we stitch it back shut, they only got one way, is to go up.
Yep.
So your soybean now is only the top, like 20% of the plant. Those leaves are capturing light.
Yep.
We're in relay cropping. Now we increase light per plant 4 or 5 times. So the plants will grow horizontally and a little vertically, and they think they're getting a longer day. So we can push the maturity of the soybeans. We can push the fertility. They're not going to just fall down. They're going to sit there and just get like this mad Gary Coleman soybean. We get more internodes, and the sky's the limit. It just makes these, and that's why I make all these Twitter videos. I'll rip it out of the ground. I'll have this huge root mass with all these nodules. and it's got 28 nodes with all these branches. So you start doing the math. If you got more nodes, more branches with nodes, and more pods per plant, then that's where this mathematics comes in. Is you can afford the gaps because you empowered the plants, and the math plays out longer.
Talk about what's happening underneath the soil profile, though. So I love the explanation above, but what's happening below in terms of the wheat and the soybeans working together?
Right. So you've got all these fibrous roots that you have these empowered wheat plants, and you got fibrous roots 3 inches deep. And just think about how vulnerable your seed is. When you lay it in the ground, it's just a seed, and it's just got to make these little roots. But if it's got a big brother, it'd be like you going to school and you're 12 and you got a big brother that's 18 in high school. He's going to kick everyone's ass.
Oh, yeah. Kicking ass, taking names.
Kicking ass, taking names. So it is allowed to live in that little microclimate in the roots. And so you get this infiltration, and it's so important to have this healthy. And then also we create this microbiome. So we're adding biochar into strip, which is carbon. So we get this, liquid photosynthesis down to the roots, exuding, feeding the microbiology and habitat in this biochar, and it's just this bliss that it's allowed to grow in.
Okay, so that's corn and beans, but we know
wheat and soybeans.
Or sorry, with cheapers,
right, yep.
Wheat and soybeans. We know though that corn and beans is the staple in the Midwest. Talk about some of your trials putting those two crops together.
So that started 3 years ago. I just went 60-inch corn and beans, and the beans got real leggy. They weren't really productive. So I met this guy named James Bates. He was a plant breeder in Hawaii. He kind of put a different spin on it. It's pretty cool. It's just a matter of figuring out the technology to scale it. But he started putting gaps. So he'd plant 2 plants, and then 2 plants over here and 2 plants. And as the sun changes position through the day, it would change the shadow casted on the beans. So they still get plenty of ambient light, plenty of direct sunlight. They just get a break from the direct sunlight through the day. And you can really maybe increase soybean yields and completely milk that curve that I keep talking about with corn. I grew a corn plant with 31 ears 3 years ago. Now, I cheated. My little 2-year-old kept peeing on it every day. So we had plenty of nitrogen, but it had sunlight all the way around. It took 7 weeks from the time it tasseled and put its first silk on until it put its last ear.
Wow.
So these plants have these brains, and they're constantly figuring out its environment and how many babies they can put in their minivan. So it doesn't matter what crop you have, the reproduction can go on forever. So if we can create these venues where they have more light, band things. So this year, just to make things easier, I went twin 120s, which mirrors the combine tires. And then we're going to come up and just push the soybeans down and harvest the corn. And the idea in the future is we can take our biochar and make strips in 120s, and both corn rows can kind of live off that biochar. A little plug on that. I mean, we can encapsulate nitrogen, keep it from leaching out of the soil profile, and create all this goodness in less units, and then allow enough light for the beans to be fine.
So talk about the harvest timing, because maybe I'm missing something, but you're gonna how does that work? Because there's such a height difference between those two crops. Right.
So that in that perspective, we're harvesting it separate. So we'll go up top, and what you can do is say you plant a 99, 105-day corn and a full season soybean. So the beans are green enough to where if the trash is coming out of the combine, it's not going to just rattle the pods. So that takes care of that. And then the other thing, like if we start doing these skip row things, we can harvest them together, and they have the technology. It's just another investment, but they have technology where it's basically a spiral. And think about the attributes of the 2 different crops. Your corn is flat, so it's going to have a lot of friction. You just make a spiral, and all your soybean plants gain momentum and spit out, and they can get it within 1% doing it that way.
I love it. Lara's watching on Twitter. And she says, sounds like you got a wide variety of soil types. Do you soil test and tailor your NPK?
Yes, but we have so much manure on our family farm that we're just mostly everything runs off of that. Now we get away from the farm and we don't do as much intensive cropping there. Now this year I kept hearing that it's all about our fertility. So I didn't put any relay soybeans other than that plot at my house. So we do variable rate things, but a lot of times we're just more worried about the pH.
Okay, so to follow up on that, what other combinations have you been working on that you feel optimistic about? Because like here in Western Canada, we've seen a lot of research on intercropping, co-mingling crops, basically mixing them in the tank and then harvesting together and separating mechanically afterwards. What are some other things that you're working on?
Well, I just purchased a meat company a couple weeks ago, and this is going to give me the means to the end to really go crazy. But I think it's all about it.
That does sound crazy.
So I met a guy several years ago, but his name's Zach Smith. If you don't follow him on Twitter. And he started this thing called stock cropping, where he's milking the curve with the corn, and then he's got this train of animals. So the sheep take down a big cover crop, and then the pigs root around, and then the chickens are the rolling basket. But the whole idea is, why are we moving around all this manure? Why don't we just put the animals out there and munch down the cover crop and then prime that spot for next year, and then get increased value for not ever the entity that we talk about all the time with commodities, but the actual product, which is the commodities are going to, which is the meat, and raise it more regeneratively. So that's big our thing this year. I mean, I can do crops till I'm blue in the face, but we made these mobile coops for sheep, and we're following it with mobile chicken tractors, and all the plants have edge effect to them. So the other thing with the edge effect too, if I'm stuffing my monocrop and I get in a pattern with high dew points and moisture, I got imagine if you ran down the beach with wool socks and it's 90, your toes get pretty nasty. And that's we got to follow with all these fungicides and all this stuff. A little bit of airflow in there is pretty good. When you do that, dry that dew off a little bit. We're doing organic acres. If you think about these little attributes that actually are the derivatives of why we're chasing after all these things, we can solve them by adding more things to it.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about weed control. Let's go use the wheat soybean example. Are you applying any herbicides, or are you relying on the crop to do the work?
So we've been using Extend soybeans, and that's made it pretty easy. We just apply it pretty earlier. That's going out, but we got a list coming. But we can ban some residuals like dual in that space. We did some hood spraying this year with really good results, and that's really excited. I mean, what was really cool about that is I had like an 80-acre field, and I had like 60% of my solution still in the tank. So I made these little trash cans on my Hagee and just sprayed only in between the wheat rows. So if you stop thinking about like I have to make this blanket, it's just like strip tillage, right? I don't need as much horsepower with the 24 row if I'm only working this much. So now I can start putting really nice residuals and stuff, but only put it on 40% of the surface area.
What do the neighbors think?
I was really nuts 3 years ago, and now that we had a field day, and we had a caravan that was a mile long of people following me to these fields. We had buses and we had a concert, and not that made them think I was any less crazy, but at least someone's listening. So.
But you do some speaking, so you're going all over the place. Have you done any work in Europe? Have you been over to Europe to give any speeches at all?
I want to. I've been asked to, but my whole thing now, I've got a 4 and a 5-year-old, so I gotta keep it pretty toned down. But I think it's going to be a way that we can travel here in a few years.
I just find it so fascinating, right? Because there's some sort of like simplicity to it, in the sense where we're putting two crops that we would grow anyways in the same field at the same time, getting them to coexist. There's like a co-benefit, and we're getting the wheat yields are a little bit less, but the soybean yields are right where we would expect they would be, even if we were monocropping. That, from just a revenue per acre standpoint, that's like a giant gap win.
Yes. I want to talk a little bit about the pruning. Because
go for it. Yeah, go for it.
This is huge. So, use my little example here, if you can see it. When I remove the wheat biomass that before was standing up here, and I go to this, I can get solar intrusion. So that plant now, a soybean plant like at R2 will have, say, 12 to 14 internodes. So normally all the internodes down low will produce some pods first, but then they don't have any production. So when we can empower the whole plant, photosynthesis doesn't really translocate in the plant. That's why they harp, protect the ear leaf, because we put so many corn plants out there that it's going to make one ear. But you can put ears on every, internode. And that's where all this magic happens. And I'm going to get really into weeds with you,
Good.
Shaun, here.
Love it.
But if you look at phi, I talk about this all the time. They make fun of me, but you got 1 + 1, 2, 5, 8. So this is a sequence of growth. If you cut a corn plant in half, you see this.
Bring it up closer so we can see it.
It's just really simple math, but this is phi, or the golden ratio, and everything grows in that thing. So in relay, if we can get further along on the sequence, so we can get this solar intrusion at R3, we're so far ahead on the sequence, meaning we have all these internodes and branches and reproduction point, that next flip is going to have so much more value than a smaller plant. So if we get really late maturing soybeans, we give it way more light when it's making reproduction. That's how we can get 1,000 pods on a bean plant. And it's this math. It's like this tortoise and the hare effect, where the old men will drive by and be like, oh, these gaps, those won't make 30. Those look like crap. And then all of a sudden we get a rain and they make 100. And they're like, this isn't true. But it's just like building a network. Like, it will take care of itself. Just get a little vulnerable and do things a little different.
I think we need to check his monitor. It has to be wrong.
That's why we put the way wagon out there.
Have you tried winter canola or peas or anything like that?
We just don't have a real close market, but I'd love to try all kinds of things. I planted some peas this year, and somehow they didn't go to my place and went back to North Dakota, and we got them not till May, and they didn't work out too well. We terminated them. They like it cooler.
Have you had any communication? Danny, who's watching on Twitter, he farms in Saskatchewan. People that you've been working with in Canada, Eastern Canada, Western Canada, you've been working with anybody sharing some knowledge at all?
Through Twitter, I was at several conferences this year. Now it always gets blurry because, like I said, the Canadians know how to put them back. But
back to that again.
Phil from Flexi Finger has been great. He's come to the field day. He's helping me with product. We're going to innovate new ways to harvest this corn and soybean deal. But yeah, there's tons of them. We had a really good turnout at the field day, but you guys couldn't come down this year.
No. Hey, what started the hashtag Farm Weird?
That was my wife's idea as we were about ready to go to bed like 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I just want to encourage everyone to share what they're doing, because I think that's where we really learn. It's not figuring out how to gain 3 or 5 bushels with something that costs you 3 to 5 bushels,
Yeah,
that's madness.
You mentioned fungicide earlier. Do you use fungicide, or do you use the airflow based on how you've changed the canopy?
That does help on, organic we can't. Now we've seen gains on fungicide. Now I will say, if it doesn't rain and we stay dry, I won't apply it this year because everything's clean.
Interesting, man. So, like, it's just so interesting to me from the standpoint of just like I said, the simplicity of it, and I really encourage you to keep rocking it and keep going, because I just think stuff like this is just gains more and more momentum, and all of a sudden it clicks, and it's much more, has a mainstream feel to it, and so you're definitely gonna be one of the early innovators on it. Absolutely.
Well, I just put out a tweet last week, but what drives me mad is that guys will spend like $5 million on the setup, and they have all these consultants and all this stuff. And literally, I have a $20,000 combine, and I got a hydraulic leak, and I got no technology, and you can ruffle together like no investment and do better from a profitability and from a production standpoint by just adding some more diversity. And if someone would get, behind that a little bit, but it is a threat to big ag a little bit because I'm harping, less units, less seed, less this, and that's what supports it.
Don't you see them in? There's like this transition period where it's all of a sudden it's embraced though by some of those same companies that maybe sort of I don't know about this.
I think it's a huge opportunity to you can't. If you're into mathematics, you can't argue the derivative. I mean, the derivative is sunlight. It's free. I have a name when I'm bored and the sun's out. That's your two free things. And you start managing the water a little bit, and it's simple. Yeah.
Cool stuff.
Well,
Danny from Saskatchewan agrees. He says, I think it's not going to be that weird in a few more years. So there you go. There's some encouragement from Saskatchewan. Hey, Jason, this has been great. Really appreciate it, man.
Thanks for having me on, Shaun.
Yeah, and appreciate everybody watching today. Tomorrow on RealAg Live, we're going to have the launch of Ontario Diagnostic Days. We got Horst Bonner, Dave Hooker, Albert Tenuta, all three of those guys, researchers on the same show, and we're going to have a lot of fun. It'll be a special 60-minute edition of RealAg Live. Thanks, everybody, for getting real. And there's the curve. Milking the curve. That's my new hashtag, milking the curve. I love that. Before I let you go, where'd you get that? Is that from Stats then, or where'd you get the name for that?
No, I was a marketing degree, and you can sell Christmas trees the day after Thanksgiving and fireworks the day before 4th of July. In marketing, you can waste so much time by not striking while the iron's hot. You need to double down then, and it's simple economics.
Cool stuff. We've been talking to Jason Mauck. Give him a follow on Twitter, @JasonMauck1. Thanks a lot, Jason. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.